Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Zen Curious podcast. I'm Kira Hanselman, and as usual, I am really excited for today's conversation. In this episode, I sit down with my co-host, Lauren Tancredi, as she shares her deeply transformative journey through the Peruvian jungle. Recently, Lauren completed a master plant dieta at Shamanflora, immersing herself in solitude and ancient plant medicine practices for nearly 2 weeks. We dive into what called her to this profound experience, the healing power of working with the master plant Bobenzana, a plant known for deepening self-love, and how her time in the jungle brought both intense grief and unexpected peace. Lauren opens up about her struggles, breakthroughs, and the life-changing lessons she learned while spending 8 days in solitude, fasting, and working with sacred plant medicines. This is a conversation about letting go, reconnecting with the self, and finding love and clarity in the deepest parts of our being. If you've ever been curious about healing journeys or the power of solitude, this one's for you. The journey begins now. Welcome back, everyone, to the Zen Curious podcast. I am really excited about today's conversation. A couple of weeks ago, we had Jimena Garcia from Shamanflora on, and Lauren mentioned her master plant dieta that she went on. And so today, we're going to get to have an in-depth discussion with Lauren about her time in the jungle, her master plant dieta, and what does this all mean? So thank you, Lauren, for being willing to share your journey about that with us today. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be able to share. I feel like a lot of the healing work that we do individually is meant to be shared so that we can encourage, motivate, and support others in finding their path, finding their Zen, finding their way back home to themselves at the end of the day. And so
Absolutely.
this is just one of
Yeah.
the other tools that I've got to put into my toolbox, spending like almost 12 days in the jungle.
So for those listeners that have no clue what a master plant dieta is, can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, it's funny, my teacher will always say, like, the Dieta is going to be the next ayahuasca wave, right? So there's a lot of people that go and sit with it's a master plant is ayahuasca too, right? Or one of the indigenous plants of the jungle. And so the master plants are other plants that are in the jungle. There's a variety of them, right? And they all have different healing properties and uses for depending on what the participant or the person is looking to work with, right? And so a lot of times, the dieta is a solitude diet, and essentially what happens is we prepare our body the same way that we always will, right? So there's like a cutting out of sugars and processed foods and like the prep phase that goes into any plant ceremony, right? Because we want to be great vessels for the plant to be able to work through us. And a lot of times we want to be able to take off all the toxins. So it's not like just kind of working with the superficial layers of who we are, but really allowing us to kind of dive deeper into the aspects of ourselves. And so, when we drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes or eat sugar, like all of that stuff kind of is like the fluffy layers, the superficial layers that the medicine has to get through before it can actually get into our core essence, right? And so we have a diet beforehand. And that is ideally 7 days, sometimes longer if you can make that happen, because the cleaner you are, the more that you'll get, just like anything that we do, how we approach it is what we'll get out of it. So we travel down to the jungle of Iquitos, Peru. There's a retreat center that's about an hour outside of the city. We walked almost 2 miles into the jungle on a dirt road. And then we spent 8 days, well, more than that, but 8 days in a solitude diet. And so when you're in the diet with the master plant, you open up your dieta with an ayahuasca ceremony. So the first night you sit with ayahuasca. Earlier that day, I had the opportunity to actually make my tea, which I dieted Bobenzana, which is um, a plant of self-love, and then we can talk more about that too. But yeah, and then for the next 8 days, you're after your ayahuasca journey, you go into a tambo, which is kind of like the Ure of the jungle. It's like a a wood hut out in the middle of the jungle. You're by yourself in a little secluded place. And for the first 4 days, the only thing that you consume outside of water is your tea. And so, or a tincture, depending on what plant you're dieting. And so the shaman comes in the morning, or the maestra comes in the morning and in the evening, and will feed you, like give you your tea and check in on you. And so you drink this tea twice a day and you're fasting. And then, the last 4 days are they'll start to bring you food in the morning and the evening too. And then on the last night that you're there, you get to end your diet. She comes and ends your diet, and you sit with ayahuasca again to like close your ceremony. And so essentially you're by yourself for 8 days in the jungle with nothing but your clothes and a toothbrush and maybe a hairbrush and a journal and a pen. And so you're really forced to go inward and connect with yourself on these journeys.
So what called you to this? It's incredible. It's incredible that you went through that process. It's hard to even wrap my mind around for myself today. But what called you to take this inward journey? Was there something going on in your life, or was it just like because of the circle of people you're around?
Yeah, I mean,
How did you?
first of all, I always say like I never am going to sit ayahuasca again because it's one of the most challenging plants that I've had to work with, right? And so I was very hesitant to go and do the master plant diet because I really didn't want to sit with the ayahuasca portion, and it was also really magical. So I essentially I'm in a year-long training program with Omar after I had done my Cambo training with him. I've been working with him to learn how to serve another plant medicine called Tepescuite, which is considered like a Mayan ayahuasca. It comes from the Yucatan Peninsula. And as part of the training, we get to go down to the jungle because as a facilitator, one, if you're ever going to sit with anybody, you want to sit with somebody who's doing their own work, right? I'm not here to heal myself by healing other people. I'm here to share my healing so that I can understand what people are going through and then support them on their own journeys, right? And so a lot of the intentionality around going down to the jungle is really being able to like one, go through my own individual process, but two, also to build my allies, right? And so a lot of times, and especially more now than ever, what we're experiencing as people come and sit with us in ceremony is they've sat with somebody who has not done like a wonderful job in creating a really safe container. And so people are in a little bit of a spin afterwards. And honestly, um, the more and more I hear about it, the more I realize how important it is to have these allies. So when we're actually doing the medicine work and we're doing our prayers and setting up the altar and calling in the spirit of the medicine, because they are spirits at the end of the day. I think we talked about this a little bit with Omar recently. Um, we can call in all of the other allies of the that we've worked with to help guard and protect the space. And honestly, sitting with Omar, who sat with 8 master plants and a variety of other medicines, like is very different than sitting with somebody who's working with one medicine and doesn't have the protection or allies of these other spirits that he's calling in. And so for me personally, one, I was on my own healing journey and got to be in the experience of that. But secondarily, I can see now how Bobenzana has come into my ceremonies and have brought in even more love and light and like beauty
Mhm.
to what it is that I get to experience and how I get to help support other people that are like really looking to deepen their connection to themselves and to love themselves more, because at the end of the day, we can only love somebody else to the capacity in which we love ourselves.
Yeah, so true. So 8 days of solitude in the jungle.
Yeah.
I mean, 8 days of solitude
not in the jungle
I know.
would be difficult. So, wrapping your mind around 8 days of solitude in the jungle with nothing, including no food,
Hmm.
sounds wild. What was the most challenging part about that?
Oh my God, being with myself, for sure. I mean, it was like, it's interesting. I read this book by Ram Dass, like Polishing the Mirror. No, it was a different book, but it was a Ram Dass book way back when. And that he talks about your thought prison. And it was like being a prisoner to my thoughts. And just recognizing like how much work I've been doing, but I still have these like a record player like rolling in the background, right? And so when you're really forced to like be with yourself, all of a sudden you hear and see everything that's been going on kind of like in the background up until that point. And so that was probably the most challenging part, in addition to like, I feel like in my own personal experience, when I started doing this medicine work, like my life started falling apart. And I know it's coming together, but it felt like it was falling apart. I've probably talked about this before, but putting my dog down, moving houses, moving into a new city, moving out of my relationship, my business partnership shifting, like there's been a lot of change in a very short period of time. And so, I went into the jungle and I was still in a lot of deep grief. And, I was getting really challenging because I was talking to Jimena and like she's telling me about this beautiful experience she had with Bobenzana and how it'd come and sing to her. And she felt all these dreams about love. And I'm like, I'm grieving, I'm waking up crying, and I want to punch the girl that, my ex is with. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, where is the love that's supposed to be coming
I'm not feeling the love.
medicine? Like, where is it? And by day 6, I finally wrote a letter to Jimena and the owner, and I was like, I'm worried about myself because I have not stopped crying. And even the maestro would come in the morning and be like, Lauren, estás triste, estás llorando hoy. Like, are you gonna cry? Are you gonna be sad today? And it's like, and just like messing with me because I like couldn't get over myself. And when I wrote Jimena the letter, I was like, I'm worried about myself. I'm worried that I'm doing it wrong. Like, I'm not gonna like, I've got 2 days left, and like, I don't feel like, where's the love? Where is the love that's supposed to be coming through? And she wrote me back and she's like, you got to go through it to get out the other side, and don't worry, you've got time. And so it was challenging, man. It was really challenging. I mean, the beautiful thing about Bobenzana is it's a lucid dream medicine. And so, I after my ayahuasca ceremony, I drank my first cup of the medicine, and I fell asleep for 2 hours, and that's when I had the dream. And then I woke up like punching my bed and sobbing, and I was so upset and like crying because I had a dream that my ex-boyfriend was moving in with this new woman that he has been dating. And I was like so upset because that's all I wanted in my relationship. And I finally sat up in the bed and I was like, okay, Lauren, like you're okay. And I look and I hear, and I was like, what was that? There's this giant tarantula on the floor. And I'm like, nobody's going to save you but yourself. Like, how are you going to get this big bug out of your tambo? Because you
Oh
can't call
my
anybody
God.
in. You're all by yourself, right? And so it really kind of made me a little bit unfuckable with in some ways because like I had to navigate some really tough truths and experiences being in the jungle. And it was really, really challenging. And it was, the whole time I was there, I was like, writing letters to myself like one more day, like you can do it. Day 1 is done. Great job. Like trying to stay like in a positive mindset. And the whole time I was there, I wanted to leave. And as soon as I got home, I wanted to be back. It was like one of those
It's
things
so
like you
funny.
don't know what you have until it's gone.
Isn't that life? I mean, I feel like that's life. I think it's really interesting you bringing up the just being really sad through the process because my I remember my first experience with psilocybin. I came in with this, I don't want to say expectation, but kind of like you were explaining how Jimena was like, oh, it's like the plant sings to me, this beautiful experience.
Uh,
Well, I had in my mind what it was going to be like based on what other people told me, right? But it was nothing like that. I
yeah.
saw nothing fun. I saw no, it was no, I did feel an immense amount of love, but I sobbed for 6 hours straight. I couldn't tell you why I sobbed. I just sobbed for 6 hours straight. And I really believe like I'm not, I am an emotional person. Like I do cry, but mostly about situations and other people's, never about really me. I
Mhm.
never mourn for or grieve for myself. And I feel like the what the medicine did for me in that experience was it was having me feel
Mm.
having me feel that things that I never allowed myself to feel, like grief that I never gave myself permission to feel, to express
Yeah.
so raw.
Yeah.
And I it is really beautiful the way the plants work like that.
Yeah. I think like
Um,
it's an expression of love for ourselves to be able to hold ourselves and like grieve the same way that we would for a loved one. And so, I feel like, in this last year, I have probably cried more than I ever have in my entire life. And it was just like years and years of repressed emotions that were coming up before I went there, while I was there, even after to an extent. But I felt like there was something in me that needed to come out and through in order to even like well, one, because I love myself enough, I got to grieve. And there's part of me that was grieving the old versions of myself and the misunderstandings and the hurt and the pain and like, all the things that I thought love was in some ways, like, um, and, all of the things that I was experiencing were just mirrors of some deeper desire or some fears that I had. And it allowed me to see. And so, when you're sitting with yourself for 24 hours a day without a whole lot going on, it is the most time I felt like it makes you realize like how much time we actually have in a day and how distracted we are by all the
oh
things
my gosh.
around us. And all these distractions of are avoidance to feeling, whether it's pain, sorrow, sadness, or happiness, joy, and like, all of the things. But they're just like distractions in us doing instead of us being. And this time really allowed me to be with myself and see all of like the deep, dark corners, as well as, some really beautiful insights and joys. And like as much as the grief was there, like I also had really powerful downloads of like messages and stories and things I get to like call in my life and like the stuff my heart desires. And so, it was definitely not an easy journey, but I would totally sign up and do it again. Totally go back.
Yeah, we don't realize how you talked about the downloads and the messages and even just being and feeling like we don't realize how often that's happening because that's happening for us all the time whether we're paying attention or not. And I don't want to say the problem, but for lack of finding a better vocabulary word in the moment, the problem is that we are distracted, we're not paying attention to this information that's available to us all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a beautiful thing to have gotten to experience that the way that you did.
Yeah. And
Is,
part of it's like clearing out all the noise in my head so that I could actually get to that place, right? I'm so distracted with like my ex and like living in this past pattern and like, my love is all wrapped up in energy tied up in something that's not even for me, right? And so going through the process of like grieving it allowed for space to come in so that I could actually see like the downloads and have a vision of my person my last ayahuasca ceremony. And until that ceremony at the end, like I was having heartburn and like I like, puked all over myself. It was a hot mess. And whatever that sadness was finally came up and out. Like it was literally an entity that was like attached to me that needed to get removed. And I felt like, oh, wow,
mm,
like this is
wow.
my creation. It's all my creation at the end of the day, that I get to experience
Yeah.
in this lifetime.
So you just said, you puked all over yourself.
Ah,
I think that people, when they talk about plant medicine, they talk a lot about purging,
yeah.
and this is both a physical purge and an energetic purge with certain plants. Not all of them
Right.
you
Right.
know, create the physical purge. But talk a little bit, is there any particular moments with the plant that you worked with, or even through ayahuasca in the beginning and ending ceremonies where you experience, like, maybe talk a little bit about what that purge is like,
Yeah.
both the physical and energetic
Yeah, totally.
side of it?
So Bobenzana and a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot of the master plants. Some of the master plants are more energetic. So Bobenzana definitely does not, it's non-psychoactive. So you're not hallucinating, you're not like going into the realms that you do with ayahuasca, right? And so that, I mean, my crying and anger coming out was the purge. Like that was the purge. It was the release of energy that was trapped within me, right? And so people can purge in a variety of different ways. They can sweat, they can cry, they can laugh, they can vomit, they can, they can have it come out the North Pole or the South Pole, basically, right? Um, and energetically, what will happen is our like the heavy emotions, or what the Matisse tribe calls the panomia, like this dark cloud that surrounds us, starts to like lift up off of us, right? And so, and oftentimes too, there's medicines, plant medicines that we can utilize and work with in order to like get rid of viruses and vaccines. And like, so you can purge all of those things from a physical perspective, from an emotional perspective, and then energetically we start to clear the auric field around us. And so I come out of the jungle and I'm like a lighthouse because I'm so sattvic, like pure and clean from my diet plus the medicine plus the ayahuasca. It's like, okay, now all the things are being attracted. Like I could see myself walking down the street and different people are looking at me just because of the energetic that allows it comes through you from being in this really pure state, right? And so the Bobenzana itself is more of the emotional, energetic type clean. There is no real sickness or anything like that. There's other master plants where there are people that do get sick and they're like deep healers. Like I want to say it's Uchu Sananga or Chirik Sananga. One of those two can also cause hallucinations. It's super sweaty. It works on the physical body a lot more. They call it like a surgeon, right? So it goes in and helps repair things. But there's a dozen or more plants that you can work with from a master plant perspective, where you sit in the same kind of series of 4 days, 3 to 4. It's typically 3 days of drinking the medicine. I drank the medicine for 4 days. I fasted for 5 days. And when I was doing it, I wasn't hungry. Like I didn't feel hungry. Other people experience hunger, of course. Like everybody's journey is a little bit different. I just drank a lot of water and was really connected to the plant. And I was like, oh, I can maybe actually not eat for the whole 8 days, except for my legs were cramping and I couldn't walk and I needed more electrolytes. Like, so there was a little
Yeah.
bit of a physical manifestation, but it wasn't directly related to the medicine. It was more because I was sweating. We're in the middle of the
Because
jungle.
you're a human being, like your physical being needs energy to
Absolutely.
be
Like,
a being.
yeah, to like exist, right? And
Yeah.
then they're taking bucket showers in a creek, and it is rough living, but I'll tell you, like the jungle is literally the heartbeat of the earth. And when you're out there and you're watching the sun rise and fall, and the bats are coming in, you can hear the monkeys, like there's giant like monarch butterfly that like every morning I woke up and it would fly outside of my tambo. I mean, it's beautiful and it's also scary. And a lot of my experience was I didn't want to leave my tambo, especially after having a tarantula in it, which I was like, I don't even know if it's poisonous. Like, what's going on? Um,
I don't like to walk to my kitchen to get water in the middle of the night. I can't imagine being in a jungle
yeah,
by
I mean,
myself.
opening up the compost bin and like going to throw the shreds, the wood shavings into the toilet, and there's like frogs popping out at you and like moths coming out at night, and there's like I'm a city girl. I'm not used to this kind of stuff. And so I had a hard time. And my last ayahuasca ceremony is when I actually had my purge, and so I vomited. It needed to, whatever was there needed to come up and out. I've had plenty of ayahuasca ceremonies where I've been on the toilet in a bucket in my face and the floor has been opening up underneath me, like it's can be
Wild.
super psychoactive and wild and purgatory, and like it just depends on the medicine you're sitting with and the intention that you're holding and the facilitators that are, creating the space. And so, and at some point in working with medicine, like there's the ultimate surrender. I mean, I was sitting there for the first 45 minutes to an hour and a half of my ceremony being like, you never have to do this again, like negotiating with the ayahuasca and like wanting to be like, make it stop, because after not eating for 4 almost 5 days and then eating only a bland diet, like going into that last ayahuasca ceremony, like I was the cleanest I'd probably ever been in ayahuasca. So when you drink the medicine, you're flying in all the good ways. And so yeah, it was super physical for me. I had a lot of physical pain. I got like a lot of adjustments. I came back and my chiropractor's like, I don't even know how to explain what happened to your neck, but it's the best I've ever seen it. I've been working with him for almost 2 years. And so I attribute it to the medicine. And like, I feel like when we have really good intention um, and prepare our bodies, like we can have really miraculous things support us with when we're working with these tools. And the maestra like that I worked with was amazing. And like I would tell her like, I was feeling sad and she'd like, bring me a tea for sadness. And then I had other stuff going on and like working with my thyroid, and I had a little pulsario, which is like a pulse in your body from deep sadness. And sometimes it like gives you bad effects or um, a little bit more challenging journeys when you're working with psychedelics. And so like she just like worked with me in like a variety, like I literally like picture her like breaking stuff off the trees in the jungle and coming to my hut and being like, here, wrap this around this and do this. And meanwhile, she's speaking
So
Spanish. So
cool.
like some of the things I understood, some of the things I was just like, I don't even know. I was like, which is why I finally wrote Jimena a letter, because after 6 days, I'm like, I don't think my Spanish is working very well. Like, what do I need to tell her to make this like to help me do the things? But I felt so safe and supported, and like, she was doing everything she could to help me go through and like process this journey. And it just again like it allows us to have deeper connection to ourselves, to source, to like the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. Um, and I walked out of my ayahuasca journey after having a real intense experience in the beginning, super physical. Like I said, I purged. And it was like when ayahuasca was like coming into the end of my journey, I was walking into the void and I see the whole entire jungle like coming to life around me. And she was like, "Why are you scared? Like you created this." And so my 10-minute
Mm.
walk back to my tambo turned into an hour and a half because I was like just infatuated with everything. Like, oh my God, I didn't see those spikes on the tree. And look at this green leaf. And like just being in deeper connection and reverence to the reality that was being shaped
Creation.
around me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like,
I always think about the way children look at things, like everything they're seeing for the first time, and it's magical and it's amazing, and it's so sad that we as adults, or even, I mean, it even happens earlier than that, we stop seeing the magic and the beauty in just the leaves on a tree or the flower, or I mean, it's everything is so magical and beautiful, but we don't pay attention anymore.
yeah, and I think that was one of the biggest takeaways. And I've been saying this for a while, but for me was, Lauren, you got to slow down to speed up. You got to slow down because you're missing the things that are right in front of you. And I teach this to people like, they're like, we want more and more and more and more and more. And it's like, wait, what about what's right in front of you? Have you been in relationship with what's here already? Because that's where the more comes from. It's like just deeper connection with what's already here.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, and I know this is something that a lot of that maybe scares people about plant medicine, but also makes them very curious about it. Is the psychoactive nature of some of the medicine, or the hallucinations that come from some of the medicine. So I guess maybe talk a little bit about that experience and why you think that's an important part of plant medicine journeys. Like why do people need that, or why is it helpful?
Look, hey, it's not for everyone. And I get that. I never want to push that experience on you. It was like, I didn't even want to say ayahuasca going back into this, and Bobenzana, again, it's non-psychoactive. So a lot of the master plants are non-psychoactive and they really work on like the soul level or the energetic level. And, some of them that are more intense may actually have some properties of like hallucination, but only because it's like doing really deep work in your body. And so, I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, right? So I've been working with Tepe. Tepe's an NN-DMT. It's super psychoactive, right? And I'd sit at the mat and every time I'm so afraid because my mind wants to make sense of it all. And the reality is that most of us live in our minds. And so, for me, some of the hallucin is like the pinta, the hallucinations, the psychoactive properties allow us to kind of realize like it's not about living in the mind because you can't make sense of some of the shit. You really can't make sense of it. And so it allows us to like one have this expanded state of consciousness, but really allowing us to like drop into our hearts and trust like there's more to life than what we actually are seeing in this 3D world. And so for me, that's one of the like benefits or how I've become into better relationship with the visualizations. Because at first, I mean, there was times where I remember like doing journey work with Melissa, who's also been on the show, and like eating like 3 grams of mushrooms and being like on the floor crying and being like, I am not safe. Like I don't feel safe. I'm not safe. This is scary. Like I was in fucking outer space in another world. Like, and part of I think we talked about this with Omar too, is like when you're in an ordeal, like you're in it for a long period of time, like your mind is still trying to make sense of it. And it's not necessarily for the mind to
You
make
got
sense.
to be ready.
Yeah, it's like you just gotta be the observer of it and know, like, this isn't all about you at the end of the day. There's a greater interplay that's happening and exists. And, for me, it's like, it just allows me to like let go a little bit, especially working with a non-ordeal medicine like Tepe. It's like 8 to 20 minutes. I don't have to make sense of it all. I just know I saw a freaking cool picture show and like some of the things make sense eventually. And they're like, oh, that dropped in this nugget of wisdom or whatever it is. But, I think a lot of it is for us to realize that, the body can dissolve and the soul can still exist in this greater
Yeah.
of life.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been my experience. It's like you just you become hyper aware of the connectivity of everything, the connection between everything, and the the connection. I mean, like the oneness,
Mhm.
the oneness.
Yeah.
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 So I think one of the difficult things about having an experience like you had in the jungle, or really any experience that feels really life changing in that way, is to come back and have to be back into reality, back into normal life, where no one else around you has been through this thing or experienced what you just experienced, but and they're exactly the same, but you feel so different.
Yeah.
So what's it like coming back to normal life after an experience like that?
Yeah, well, this is integration. This is really where the ceremony begins, like this is where our work comes into play. And so, after the jungle, I landed up flying back here into Florida and hopping in my car and going up to Tennessee and being in the mountains for a week because nature's super healing. And I wanted to be not in the hustle and bustle of the world. But even after a weekend ceremony that we do often, like people got to go back to Monday. And it's real,
Yeah.
like being in the matrix, now having this body of knowledge and wisdom that this is only a piece of what reality is, right? It's only a dimension in the multidimensional realities that in which we exist. And so, one, having community, well, I'd start with nature, super important. Having community that you can lean into. I remember after my first ayahuasca experience, I didn't talk to anybody for 3 days. I was like, what the fuck was that? I saw aliens. I saw people shape shifting. Like, am I part of a cult? Like, what is going on? Like, I had, and for years I've been in what I call the big funny, where I feel like I'm the cosmic joke of the universe. You've probably heard me talk about this before, right? And and just like questioning everything because you don't know what's real or what's not. And so it's so important for us to have our own grounding practices because this is a dimension in the dimensions that we're existing in most of the time, right? So putting our feet in the earth, connecting to nature, hugging a tree, journaling, singing songs, right? Either the ikaros that you sit in ceremony or the music, the ceremony music that you listen to. Journaling a ton, right? Connecting to people that get it. And there are so many organizations um, and communities that are doing this work so that you don't have to feel alone because you're not at the end of the day. Like we are all seeing aspects of, something greater than ourselves. And many of us see the same things. Like a lot of times the wisdom of the planet is represented in similar pictures and visions that are shared amongst the group that's present, and so um, and then there's integration coaching, there's people that can help talk. There's one of the guys that came to ceremony a couple weeks ago, like been doing art to express what he saw, like, and so it's like how do we, like what are we making it mean, and or how do we create meaning with it in our lives is really like, now we've got this new energy, like what do we get to do with it? How do we get to share it,
Mhm.
the world in some ways and allow it to be expressed through us instead of, for a long time, I think I was just like, I wasn't integrated. I was like, there's that thing over there, and then there's me, and like there and me, and there and me, and like not like, ooh, how do I weave this into who I am becoming in every single day of life? So
Yeah, yeah. What advice would you give somebody who is listening to this? Maybe they've considered it, maybe they haven't at all, but they're curious now. What advice would you give them um, for someone who's curious but maybe feeling a little afraid?
yeah, one, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk and support you and help you decide, and I would say like if you're curious, then there's probably a plant that's calling you. And so you just get to be in relation with what the curiosity is and open, because this is the same thing we were just talking about. It's like the plant's probably presenting itself to you, you just don't know. Like I have a friend of mine that keeps posting frogs everywhere. I'm like, dude, you need to work with Cambo. Like there's some reason that frogs are showing up all over your space, right? And so, pay attention to like the flowers, the birds, like there, if the medicine's calling you, it will show itself in variety of forms.
Mm.
And then the other piece is like, there's one thing to be a psychonaut and to travel the multidimensional realms, and there's another piece to do your healing. So, depending on what it is that you want to work on or that you're working through, there is likely a medicine that can help support you. So, there's a variety that you can choose from, and really getting clear on your intention will help drive the next step or action. And then from a fear perspective, like it will help subside the fear when you know that there's intent behind what you're doing. Like like it's like going to the gym. Like I know I want to have a strong body as I age, and so I go to the gym, but it took me a really long time to not be fearful of going to the gym. Like I was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to hurt myself and like all of the things, right? And so it's like, oh, I hired a trainer. They helped me navigate things. And now I can go in and be like, oh, I know how to work these things and do the stuff. And, that's why there's guides and facilitators out there to really help support you on your journey.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all about this. This is a hot topic. I think that we'll talk about it again. We've talked about it before. And, everybody wants healing.
Mm-hmm.
They might not even be aware that that's what they want or that's what they need. But I think if we really go deep and ask the questions we want to bring healing into our lives because we're looking for peace. I think, and the whole point of this is to bring people modalities to help them find more peace in their life. So I appreciate the work that you do and the fact that you share it because it is healing for others to get to see someone else's journey and get to see their healing and also give them permission to explore and try things out for themselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you
So
for
thank you.
my curious friend of all my crazy adventures and and helping me share. It's a gift. It really is. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all of your information again, even though we have it in, people know how to find you, but we'll make sure they definitely know by adding it to all of the show notes. And we will see you all back next week.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope this conversation with Lauren has left you inspired. Her journey is a reminder that healing isn't always pretty, easy, or comfortable, but it is always worth it. Whether it's sitting with difficult emotions, facing grief head on, or experiencing profound moments of connection with nature and God or spirit, Lauren's story shows us the incredible power of slowing down and being present with ourselves. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend or leave us a review. It helps us spread the message of healing and curiosity to more people like you. We'll see you next week.